Yay! Laura,
Got
welcome
it.
to studio class. This is so great. I'm so excited to have you on to be a masterclass guest. This is wonderful. Would you please introduce yourself and say a few words about you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Strickling. I'm a soprano and I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. But I currently live on an island in the Caribbean called St. Thomas. And we've been here for 7 years now, which is kind of mind blowing.
7 years. Wow.
And when we moved here, I was like, oh, well, there's the end of my career. And yet somehow I'm still stranded on an island and I'm still singing too. So you never know what life is going to throw at you.
Right. But you've also kind of lived all over. Can you talk about some of the places that you've lived?
Yeah. So after I went to Peabody Conservatory right before you did, right? So like we didn't actually overlap, but we were there similarly.
Yeah.
And then I stopped singing after Peabody for 4 years. And when I was not a singer anymore, I lived in Morocco for a year and studied classical Arabic with my husband. And then after we got back from Morocco, a couple of years later, my husband got a job in Afghanistan. And so we kind of moved to Kabul.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I had started singing again. And so instead of staying in Kabul, I flew back and forth from Kabul to DC and New York to sing. And then
what a commute, Laura.
Let me tell you, that 18 hours from DC to Dubai got real old. but then after we came back from Kabul and like we were done with Kabul, then my husband got this job on the Virgin Islands. And I was like, well, that sounds, I mean, it's not exactly where I thought we would end up, but that sounds better than Kabul. So.
Right. Well, and you'd had
So
this kind of experience of traveling, living maybe outside of where your regular gigs were happening. I don't know. You had some that's definitely, like I said, a commute. So kudos to you for having that let's figure it out attitude. I think that's so part of who you are as a person, as a musician, as an artist, just that let's figure it out attitude.
Out. Well, and if I was really smart, I would have studied French immersion when we lived in Morocco. But again, I didn't know I was going to be a singer again then.
Right.
And if I was really smart, I would have maybe tried to sing in Europe when we were living in Kabul, shorter flights. But I guess I just wasn't where I wasn't brave enough to try that. So I didn't. So
but I think, isn't that interesting, is that I think each one of that information comes to us as we're able to take it in, take it on, take on those challenges. So I think that's disingenuous to say if I were smarter. You're a pretty smart cookie. So Laura,
yeah,
I usually start all of our masterclass episodes by saying, what's an intention that you're keeping for yourself right now? So this can be anything, but really, what's an intention that you're keeping for yourself?
I think coming out of COVID, I have felt very unmoored in my personal practice and feeling like there was a time where I just felt in such good vocal shape where I never even needed to warm up because it was just there for me. It was there because it was just ready because I was constantly conditioning and constantly learning and constantly practicing and constantly studying. And I got out of the practice during COVID. And so coming back to that and saying, what does a life in music actually look like now that I actually get to live that life again? And so trying to be gentle with myself, because of course a lot of these things were out of our control, and we all wish that we'd spent the entire pandemic learning 5 operas and 3 foreign languages, but most of us didn't. And so here we go back into the real world, and being gentle with ourselves, but getting back into the swing of things.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe what some of the day-to-day practices look like for you that are helping you get back into the swing of things?
Oh man, I wish I was that like procedural about it. But actually what it was really ended up being is, well, I have some gigs coming up. I better learn
Yeah.
that music. And so I'm doing a Pierrot Lumiere in
Right.
DC in January, and I'm actually really excited about that. And I haven't done a lot of German in
Yeah.
recent years, and so kind of just jumping in with both feet. And I don't know, I think I'm a nerd because I think my favorite part about preparing for a gig like this is translation, and
Yeah.
then making sure my pronunciation is in line. There's just the 90 steps I have to go through to get to the actual phonation.
Hmm.
And I love that part. I don't know, there's just this like organization, and colorful pens, and a really pretty binder. Like I love that stuff. So kind of getting that actually was what got me back into that, like that little feeling in the pit of my stomach, like a gig is coming.
Yes.
Prepare.
Yeah.
uh,
I so feel that.
but it's real, right?
Yes, you were not alone in that at all. I was just like, oh, I thought, we're all going to just be preparing stuff and like working on things. And I was like, wow, didn't realize how tied I was to having the thing on the calendar to work towards. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm going to use that to my advantage going forward. And I'm just going to
Well,
keep
I
figuring.
hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Although I don't feel like I learned my lessons very well. So I feel like if they're given an opportunity to like drop the ball, I'm going to do it. But I just got off of doing this opera, and
Yeah.
I with a group called Experiments in Opera in New York, and it
Yeah. Can you tell
was
us
a
more about it?
Sure. It's a 9-act opera
Whoa.
written to be televised, so that each
Yeah.
act is written as like a television episode,
Cool.
but 9 composers and 9 librettists. And I was like,
Wow.
how does that even work? How's this going to fit together, with the kind of story, with the narrative, with compositionally, is it going to feel scattered? It really doesn't. It's amazing. It's a really
Wow.
cool piece. And so we finished, like, it was like this 6-month project where we showed up, we workshopped it, we showed up, we did a musical rehearsal. A month later we recorded it. A month later we did the film acting of
Yeah.
it, where we lip synced to the recording. And like um again, these are all things I've never lip synced to a recording of myself. I've never acted for camera, which is a completely different thing than acting for stage.
Right.
So not only was I like kind of okay, well, I'm jumping back into a gig that I have, like one of my first real big gigs since
Yeah.
the pandemic. I was also like trying to pick up a new skill while trying to like fumble for my old skills. So it was really stretching, but it was really fun and really different. And um you know, I, I caught the fire again. I don't know about you, but sitting here for like a year and a half, going, am I gonna be a singer after all of this? I kind of
Mhm.
forgot why I love what I do.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, like most of it was the people. Like I got to be with
Yes.
colleagues and like make art with them. And this isn't just the singers, this is the conductors and the instrumentalists, and the lighting designer was
Yeah.
inspiring. I mean, really,
Yeah.
seriously. The cameraman, the director, like, I mean, just every single person on that set, watching them make art, and watching them kind of problem solve together, just all of those things. It
Yeah.
just made me so excited to get to do what I do again, and
Right.
made me want to do more of it. And so
Yeah.
this is how it feels. Let's do this.
Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, it is still there. It is there. I got this. Like, you're so right. Well, and just I completely felt the same way about just being around the people again of it and being like, oh yeah, no, this is absolutely such a huge part for me. Like, I just really
Huge.
want to be in these spaces. We don't make music in a vacuum. Like, we just,
No.
yeah, we need each other. So I, yeah, love that. Love that aspect of like our ensemble nature. Even if we're being soloists in what we're doing, we're still always like working together in community and all of that stuff.
I don't know about you, but I never want to sing along with the pianist track again in that room. Like
I'm like, that's for
if I can
practicing
avoid
only.
that. Yeah, exactly. Like no more
So true. Oh my gosh, I love what you were saying. There's so many interesting things about in your experiments in opera, the the things that you were learning for the first time, as well as coming back and like relearning skills. I think that's characteristic of so many of us throughout this time, especially the learning new skills and trying to put them into action alongside of keeping our craft strong and doing what we do and kind of trying to grow. So recording in all sorts of different ways, like working remotely with people in musical capacities as well. Like all of that stuff is just very characteristic of this time. And I think one of the things that I would imagine you feel the same way. So I'm kind of asking, do you consciously think about growing your skills or learning, challenging yourself as part of your practice regularly? Or is it something that just kind of comes to you because you're always wanting to take on new projects and we learn something through all of them?
Yeah, I wish I was that methodical about it. I actually think I've just been lucky in that I've been able to pursue projects that require me to stretch my boundaries. And you know, I say sometimes, like, you know, a lot of people learn one opera and do it in 5 cities. I learn 5 art songs and do them in 1 city, you know,
Yeah.
or 15 or 60, you know. It just it's just this is the nature of the beast. I'm learning so much all the time because my interests have taken me in this direction. I am required to do things that take me out of my comfort zone a little bit more than if I had chosen maybe a more traditional path.
Sure. Do you have any tips or tricks about making your music learning process more efficient? Because when you're learning so much rep, because you're performing lots of things all over the place, and that means you have to be somewhat of a quick learner. And I think some of that is probably innate, but also I'm sure you've gotten more efficient in your music learning. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I actually ended up using technology a lot more during the pandemic in
Yeah.
ways that I hadn't before, that made my process shorter.
Wow.
So I was preparing for to record a CD this past summer,
Yeah.
and the pianist and I weren't going to see each other until 1 month before the recording. And get an entire CD together in 1 month is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all new music, all new songs that neither of us had ever, you know, no one had ever heard. So
Yeah.
he would make me a piano track, and I
Yep.
would throw it in GarageBand, and I would basically learn my song along with him playing on GarageBand. I would learn my piece measure by measure, phrase by phrase by phrase by phrase. And then after I went through that process of recording myself over him, I would have a full take of the piece.
Yeah.
And I would suddenly realize that, like, by going through that process, I knew the piece pretty well. But
Yeah.
then I would have this recording of the piece and I could play it and listen to it. And it was me singing it, not Renee Fleming. Or, you know, like, I think so many times, I actually don't think that it's a huge no-no to listen to someone else's performance of
Yeah.
something if you're trying to learn music. Use the tools you have. But
Yes.
it's
Thank you.
there's no question that, like, if I listen to Renee Fleming's recording over and over and over, some of her interpretation is going to be in my soul.
Yeah.
And if I want to kind of break the shackles of you know, and really truly say, this is what I think about these words and this music and how they fit together, like, and no one else's input, then, you know, that's complicated if you have to learn music with a recording and can't do it another way.
Yeah.
I just found that like, by doing this GarageBand thing, which again never would have occurred to me before the pandemic,
Oh,
and now I've applied it to other things, not just new music, not
yeah.
just these commissions, like literally, you know, anything I learn, if I can get a pianist to record it for me, I can learn it that way, and I learn it a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's also something to be said for in GarageBand. You also have these visual elements plus like kinesthetic things
Yes.
of like putting things together. So you're really tapping into
Mhm.
different neural pathways along with the fact that you're making yourself like this really
Yeah.
useful track and it's you and all of that stuff. That's really fascinating.
Well, it's nerdy, and again, it never would have occurred to me to have done it until I had to record something for a performance once, and I was like, wow, I learned that really fast.
Yeah.
And hey, like, what? Oh, I'm gonna do this for everything.
Yeah. And you're like,
But
there we go.
if you don't if you don't use GarageBand and you don't have recording equipment and you don't want to take that route, like what I've always done is just do the work, like
Yeah.
start with the translation. I always start with the translation because the words are the foundation of everything we do. And if you don't know what you're saying, you can't possibly move forward. So
Right.
translation, and then pronunciation, and then notes,
Yeah.
and then like figuring out how my part fits in with the orchestration or the piano part. So like just I always approach it at those steps in that order, because that's the way my brain wants to absorb it. And if I do it in that order, like really well and deeply thinking about it and studying it, then usually it sticks pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. You had kind of mentioned in there this big commissioning project that you have, and I was wondering if you might talk a little bit more
I
about.
mean, from the queen of
Oh,
commissioning herself, sure.
no. I don't know about that.
All hail Megan Ihnen.
You and I are just out here pouring vocal music into the world.
It's a hose, it's a fire hose. So before the pandemic, I because I live on an island in the middle of the Caribbean, people are constantly saying, you love art song so much, you should have an art song group, like you
Yeah.
should be having a festival. And I also have a 5-year-old daughter, and
Yeah.
I just realized that like there is no way that I can be the mom I want to be and the singer I want to be and build an art song festival. I know I can't do it. But I do want to give back to the art song community, because it is important to me to be an active member, and I'm not just going and singing and giving that way, but like I want to be giving in other ways. And I was trying to figure out like what's my way, like when am I gonna be in a position to do something functional that gives back to the art song community. And I don't know, I had some recitals coming up, and I was like, I've never commissioned something. I should do that. Like,
Yeah.
haven't I ever done that? So I sat down and wrote down names of composers I might want to commission, and the net list kept getting longer and longer and longer. And I was just like, how do I pick one? How do I pick one? I know so many composers. And I think the list ended up being something like 150 or something crazy.
Oh my gosh, Laura.
And I was like, how do I? There's no way. So I was like, well, I need, like, what if I did like 2 cycles, or what if I did like 5 songs different, 5 like, and like ka-chunk. I was 38 at the time, and I was like, what if I've got time now, like what if I commission 40 songs for my 40th birthday? I've got like a year and a half, and I'll just then I could record them and promote these composers and do a kind of and so the idea kind of snowballed. And then like 3 months later, I got everybody on board, within, I wasn't sure if anybody would think it was a good idea. I wasn't sure
Oh my God.
was right for me.
You're the best.
Within like 2 months, I had like all 40 slots filled. And again, like there are way more composers that I want to and will work with. It's a 40 became not an end, a beginning to a personal mission of commitment, a commitment to commission. So 40 is where I'm starting, but of course it will grow. But I had 40 in like 2 months, and then the pandemic hit. And so like I kind of went into it knowing how much money I was going to make in 2020, and having this plan of how I was going to like approach groups about presenting premieres of all these songs. And then everything ground to a halt, and I didn't have any money. And like it was crazy. I mean, somehow I've kept the vision alive, but it certainly hasn't been as straightforward as I thought it was going to be.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm just kind of, I've realized like if my mission, my original idea was like, I'll have a big happy 40th birthday recital in New York on my 40th birthday and do all the commissions. But of course, like I turned 40 in April, and that didn't happen because the war was not possible yet, in the world. So, but it kind of like changed my expectations, but I'm still like passionate about the project and passionate about, just promoting the idea that like anybody can commission. And I would love it if like every undergrad singer was required to commission one song for their senior recital
Right.
and work with a composer at their school,
Yeah.
or a poet, like if their uncle's a poet and they have
Yeah.
someone they know, like they're pulling together the threads of artistry and collaboration around you. And if you start that early, imagine how big that could be. Like I was 38 years old before I realized I could be commissioning. And like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can be 21 and be like, you know
Yeah.
what? I found this amazing poem that I want to sing. And
Yeah.
there's this composer in my school who, like, we should see if we can work together. Like, this is like rocket science that I apparently was not able to access when I
No.
was 21.
Well, I was wondering if you would just talk about like demystifying that process for yourself, because you had gotten, and Laura, you sing a ton of new pieces and have collaborated with a lot of composers up until like that point. So it's so funny to me that you were like, I should commission things. Like, and so can you talk about just like maybe wrapping your brain around like, okay, well, I'm gonna do this. Like, you wrote to them, you did like what did that look like?
A mix of everything, because like I said, most of these composers are people that I had personal relationships, not all, but most are people I had personal relationships with. So
Yeah.
it was kind of so I have this idea, you want to do it, like, and I think a lot of times, and I actually encourage people to say, oh, I have this wonderful set of poetry I want to have said, like, find the right fit for that poem. But because of the nature of 40 at 40, I basically went to each composer and said, here's what I want to do. Here's the projects. How do I help you bring your dream projects to life? Like,
Yeah.
is there a poem you've been wanting to set and just needed an excuse to do it? Is
Yeah.
there a song cycle you've been wanting to write and you can do the first, or, one of the songs
Yeah.
for this, and that feeds into a larger vision you have. And that a couple of composers have done that. And just kind of like, what is your dream and how can I help you achieve it? Was my
That's so good.
my marching orders for myself,
Yeah.
mainly because like, obviously I have ideas, but like composers, I have to imagine, based on the ones I know, like they're sitting around like creating and like having all of these dreams about music that they could write. Like, that's not my calling. That is not what like gets me out of bed every day. It's taking their creation and bringing and giving it voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, why wouldn't I go to the expert and see like, well, hey expert, what do you want to do? So for me, that made the most sense. But I actually see, I've seen it work from every angle. It's really just about collaboration. And I think as singers, it's very rare that we're on the stage by ourselves. It's very rare. Like, most 99.5% of what we do is collaborating with our pianists, with our orchestras, with our conductors, with our quartet, with our choir, with our composer, with the librettist. And so like, just leaning into the idea that we are so much better as a community, and how can we build our community by strengthening our web of collaborations.
Yes. Oh my gosh, preach that. Yes. That's like put that on a needle point that on a pillow like for myself.
It's gonna be a really big needle point because I don't know how to shut up. So
it's a body pillow that's just totally needle pointed. Laura, one of the things that I really liked in what you were saying, I'm wondering if it felt easier to have some of the logistical conversations around commissioning because you approached them and said, like, here's this project that I'm wanting to do. What do you have that you're envisioning? What's something that you want? And how can we make that happen? That also just starts to have that conversation of like money, timeline, forces, any of the little like nuts and bolts that you would put into a contract. Then you can just start from that place and be like, how can we make this we're teaming up, how do we make this vision happen? There you go, there are the little details. Like, is that kind of how that felt?
Absolutely. And of course, with every single person, it was a different conversation. And so, and that was cool too. Because again, that's just, it's all interpersonal communication and saying like, here are my goals. What are your goals? How can we work together to make them happen? So, it was interesting. And I don't know, I mean, if I had my druthers, I'd just sing all day, every day and not think about the administrative side of anything. But
You're
that is not the world we live in.
Oh, that it were. Like, maybe we can live in a world like that at some point. Like, Laura,
Got
you
it.
mentioned, like, what are your goals? Like, how can I help you reach your goals? And I think that's also such a characteristic part of what you do as a teacher. So I'm going to ask, when you're working with voice students, what is a technical skill? What's a technical skill or technique skill that you love to teach?
Um, Text, actually. So I find that so much, like, if you are like saying a word strangely, there's usually a technical reason for that. And like,
Ooh, dig into that.
are you
Yes.
so like, I don't know. I think that so often we think of text as like kind of a means to an end, when really, as a singer, it's kind of the point. If the audience can't understand you, and you didn't say anything, and why were you even there? And so I feel like text became, at least for me in my music education, it came like item number 96 on the list of things that I needed to master. I was so worried about technique and physical manifestation of myself on the stage and all of these things, and it never occurred to me to give a damn about what I was saying and how I was saying it, and whether the audience was being moved by what I said because I was saying it, and because of the words and text I had chosen. And so, if you choose a text, you have to stand behind it. And if your audience doesn't understand what you said, then you might as well have not even said it. And so, I think, especially as I work with very beginner level students, where I am, but I think even beginner level students need to be thinking about that immediately. Like, how is that word shaping in my mouth? Is that an authentic shape, or am I doing something funny because I want to sound such a way?
Right.
So for me, just kind of I mean, obviously technique is 900 million things, but I find that text can be a really important thing to think about and focus on, almost always.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I think, like, clear text, clear diction is a means to what we're there to do, exactly what you're saying, like, just being there and communicating. I love that I sing so much in English, and I think that's how, like, I love singing in English and communicating that way from the stage. But I love that you sing in so many different languages, and you carry that same concept and clarity of text through all of them. And I think that shows in what you were saying about translations, making sure that pronunciation is, like, it's not some afterthought. It is the driver of, like, of the meaning.
Well, and you know what? It's not always easy. And I certainly have mispronounced things. And I have, if it's not my first language, I do my best, but is it ever going to be perfect? Probably not. It's not my first language, and there's a barrier. But I remember I was doing a concert in Washington D.C. once, and I was singing some Rachmaninoff songs, and this one song I just forgot the words. Like, it didn't, like, kind of deer in the headlights, like, oh, I don't remember. And I kind of just made up some Russian sounding things, and I saw three women in the back row do this, and I was like, oh God, they're Russian. Of all the languages, you can probably get away in most circumstances in the United States with messing up your Russian, and nobody in the room is gonna realize it, right? Like, whew, goodness gracious, I made it through that brain freeze. Nobody's the wiser. Not at that concert. No. There were three Russian women for whom I ruined their evening.
I love that they were with you up until that point to be like, oh no, honey, no.
Just like, I saw, you can see it in their faces, like, you did it wrong, and they know it. And so and the thing is, like, at any given concert, there could be three Russians there. Yeah. There could be two Germans there. There could be a person who, like, has studied the French language their entire life, and they're not fluent, but they know. And so the work you do it's not just to it's to honor the audience members. It's showing them respect that like they speak that language. Like
Yes.
you don't want to pretend like if the flip side is, if a person came and sang a concert in English and had a bunch of mispronunciations, you'd make fun of them, right?
Yeah.
So like, I mean, you probably would, even if it was
Yeah.
just in your brain because you're a better person than me. Just kidding. You'd roll
Oh
your
my
eyes
God.
like, oh, their English pronunciation is so bad, or
Right.
oh, like what was that word? And the truth is, like, it's the same for other people. So just like
Yeah.
being respectful.
I think it makes such a big difference when you start to have that connection to the audience. You are prepared enough that you're able to pay attention to the energy that you're getting back from the audience and the listeners. And so when something like that does happen and you noticed those three women, it's so much more poignant than getting docked in your coaching because your diction was like slightly off. Very different
Yes.
feelings when you like,
Yes.
oh, I feel like I disrespected this listener who came to have this experience tonight because I didn't go the distance in my fill in the blank, my preparation on the pronunciation. Like I just didn't get, and then when you feel that from them, it hits different.
Let me tell you that when real life, when you are a singer and you get past student experiences, and when the test is the performance,
Yeah.
and the stakes are so much higher, because the stakes are you maybe don't get hired again because you did a
Yeah.
bad job, and then you can't pay your rent, and then like, so when you're a student, you're like, oh no, I might get a bad grade if I don't learn these songs for my jury, and then my teacher will be upset with me. But like, if you want to be a singer, like your whole life is a test, and
Yeah.
the test there can be 1,000 people in the audience watching you take that test. So the
Yes.
tests never end.
The tests never end. And like, so, and I'm kind of pivoting a little bit here, but I just want to, because you had set this up with the tests never end, and the difference between what it's like for us in our professional lives versus our academic training. And one of the things that I'm just obsessed about, and you know this about me, is this idea of micro actions, being able to like break things down into these like very small units so that we can kind of not get overwhelmed by by everything that you have to
Mhm.
do to kind of keep your
Mhm.
career moving forward. I was wondering if you could talk about a micro action that you felt has been really powerful for you or impactful for you as you've built your career.
Oh my goodness, that's a hard one. Let me consider. Oh, okay. I know one. So a micro action for me that has served me well from undergrad through today is always be kind to your pianists in every possible
Yes.
way that you can. So if that's giving them a very clear copy of your music, if that's taking out a red pen and marking in all of your breaths so that they can't possibly miss it, if that's taking a green pen and writing in the translation so they know what you're saying and that they can make music with you, if that's walking up to them at the audition and handing them your folder and looking them in the eye and saying, hi, I'm Laura, I'm so excited to work with you today.
Mhm.
They are humans behind that piano.
Yeah.
I just think that like it has always been super important to me that I treat my pianists fairly, and treat them, the way I would want to be treated as an artist. And your pianist is only as prepared as you let them be, basically. If
Yeah.
you can make or break your own audition by how well you prepare your pianist, or your own recital, or your own, any just pianists are kind of like, like I said earlier, we're never on the stage alone. We're usually on the stage with a pianist. They're your partner. Foster those relationships. My goodness, I have 4 or 5 pianists that I've worked with a lot, for, years and years and years, and we're friends, and you travel with that person.
Oh
I've
yeah.
sat on trains for hours and talked and cried because we lost a competition, or, these can be some of the most important relationships in your life. So, I think just start now, like
Yeah.
make those relationships, because they're so fulfilling.
Oh yeah. That's such a great one. Thank you for thinking of that. That's such a great micro action just to keep in mind. And anyone that you work with regularly, just approaching them from that place, right? Just
Mhm.
we're in this collaborative environment all the time, like no matter what.
Yep.
So Laura, I deeply believe that curiosity is a superpower. You can see I like to ask people questions about things. Like,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if you could talk a little bit about the power of curiosity, or really just like something that you're curious about. This can be in life in general, but this can also be in music, this can be in voice, whatever it is. It's just about what am I deeply curious about?
So I think if you aren't a curious person, being a singer is probably not for you, because you're constantly, well, you're constantly needing to learn new music, but also learn, like, what do you not know? There's like so much, the repertoire is so vast.
Yeah.
And being curious about what repertoire is out there, not just being like, well, these are my 5 art songs composers cycles that I sing, and I don't need to know any more than that, because every time I do a recital I can sing these 5 cycles and I'm done.
And I'm done.
And that's like, okay, but are you going to, is that going to be, musically fulfilling? Is that going to make you the best artist you can be? Is that, so being curious about repertoire, and certainly with song, it's infinite. There, you cannot possibly cover the breadth and depth of the composers of song repertoire. And so I guess for me, that's kind of where my curiosity lies. Do you know that saying, like, you kind of, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And that can be like, that's kind of when you, I don't know, understand how much you will never understand, is like
Yeah.
the beginning of wisdom or something. And
Yeah.
I I'm devastated that there are songs that I want to learn that I will never learn, and songs that I may never cross my path, because I want to learn them all.
Right, right. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, that just like our like that, uh art is long but life is short. That's another one where I'm like, you're just gonna know, you're gonna start to realize just how much. And then also when we work in the side of like putting new ones into the world as well, we're like, not only is
Yeah.
there just stuff that I'm never gonna be able to get to, but I'm also just making new ones for somebody else to have this same feeling.
Yeah.
Like,
We're just adding to the problem. We're problem people.
problem children over here, just like, but it's so true. Oh my gosh, yes. I Before we start to wrap this up, and you can talk about this in whatever way. I know that I'm kind of springing this on you, but
No, go for it.
you had mentioned earlier, like at the very beginning of the podcast, about a time where you weren't singing, like you were done singing, and then coming back to it. And I think that I honestly think that as artists, we all go through time periods of our life in which we are not necessarily actively being that artist that we had set out to be at a moment, for whether or not they're like short periods of time or longer periods of time. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how that came about in your life, and also maybe what led you back into singing.
Sure. So after grad school, you go to school and they say, now you have your degrees, go get into a young artist program, and then you will be a singer.
Oh, of course. 1, 2,
That
3.
too.
That's it.
Clear.
That's clearly all that needs to happen.
But I auditioned for young artist programs and I didn't get into any. And if I'm very honest with myself, my technique was terrible when I left grad school. And I knew I wasn't singing well, but I didn't know how to fix it. I
Yeah.
felt like kind of rudderless. And um my husband was starting law school, and so I got a job. I was the accreditation specialist for the National Office for Arts Accreditation, and so I didn't realize kind of what a pivot it was at the time, but it really was just kind of me being like, I don't know how to become a singer. I beyond, you know, getting into an arts program, like how does one become a singer? And I didn't have an answer to that, and I didn't have an answer of how I would fix my technical problems. And so I just kind of walked away and thought, you know, I'm going to be in arts admin in nonprofits, and that, you know, that might be my path. And it didn't turn out to be my path. I actually really enjoyed it, but we, you know, moved to Morocco, and then we came back from Morocco, and I was like, well, now what do I do? You know, I had a path, and now we're back, and here I am at square one again. I'm 28 years old. Like, what should I do with my life? And my husband was like, well, you were always supposed to be a singer. And I was like, I can't just be a singer. I'm no closer to the answer of how to have a career than I was, you know, 3 years ago. And I nannied, and I started taking voice lessons with this wonderful teacher named Elizabeth Daniels in Washington, D.C. And she was super into, you know, you should do competitions, because, you know, at least for me, it gave me a goal to work towards. I didn't think I was necessarily going to be a singer, but like, if I was going to be taking lessons, I wanted to be doing it for a reason. So I started doing competitions and started doing well in competitions, and competitions were really what kind of got me a network. When you know, I hadn't sung for anyone, so I had no one to write a recommendation letter for me. I couldn't get an audition. But competitions will let you sing. You know, you can write that application for an audition, and they will just cash your check, but not hear you. But the competitions will hear you. So you know, that was my place to prove myself. And so then a lot of competitions would come with a gig opportunity attached to a win. So I started getting my first gigs from that. A little bit of money that kept kind of just the encouragement to keep going. Like, for me, I think I always kind of say competitions are great if you're the kind of person who can be, you know, to process competitions in a healthy manner, because I certainly lost way more than I was successful at. And I think
did that help you build up that kind of resilience then as well?
Yeah, for sure. You know, because you have to be able to say, oh, look at these judges' comments. This is wise. This is wisdom. This is utter crap, you know, or take it to your teacher and have them help you contextualize it. But for me, it was never about like, well, I am here to win, and Sally Smith is going down today. It was always just about, you know, like, oh my goodness, NATSA's coming up. I need 12 art songs and one aria from an opera and one aria from an oratorio. And like, so I'm learning rep, and I'm, you know, I want to sing this as the best I possibly can. And that's what I'm working on technically and language. I want this to be so good so that it's fun. Like, I'm doing a good job, and that's personally fulfilling. And so that was kind of my reason. And so I think because I didn't have a lot of pressure on myself, like internal pressure on myself that I needed to win, I had fun with it. And I was able to take, oh man, that criticism is so rough and so mean sometimes. And somehow I was able to say, okay, well, that sucked. Moving on, you know, because it does suck. It does suck. And, you know, like, some things you never forget as a human on the planet. It's like bullying, you know, you just never, it's like, that was unnecessary. Why did you say that? You know, because you could. Oh
man, yes.
But, you know, you know, and so again, that's not for everyone. Not everyone can just like be like, I'm going to do this and be perfectly fine at the end of the day. For some people, that would be soul shattering, crushing, ruin their month, ruin their year. And if you're that kind of person, then don't do competitions, because it is not, there are other ways to find your career. And that are more healthy for you, because there is an emotional cost to, to doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I always had such a feeling about, I don't have a lot of competitions in my background at all, because I felt like as a mezzo, I was never really bringing like shiny objects to competitions. And I was like,
Yeah.
I just don't feel like this is going to go the way I want it to.
Yeah, no,
So,
there is a strategy to repertoire choice, and as a
yeah.
soprano, yeah, there's no
Yeah.
question, like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well, and I
kind
think
of the
that's
art of the.
important. So I love that that's been like a path for you where you were like, okay, I'm able to work towards this, and it's giving me the fire to really refine all of these elements, like the technical skill, like the text, the communication, the, all of the performance side of things. And that really helped you kind of see the path for it, right? But
Well, the other thing is just that, like, you have to perform to get better at performing.
yes.
Standing in front of people, having that rush of adrenaline and learning how to manage your body's physical response to that, that's a skill. And if
Yeah.
you don't put yourself in front of people, you're not going to have that chemical response, and you're not going to learn to deal with that chemical response. And so, like, even if it's 4 people in your living room, like, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And so competitions were a way for me to do it, but like, there is no substitution for singing in front of people to learn how to
Yeah.
sing in front of people.
Oh
And
my gosh.
sometimes
Yep.
you have to make your own opportunities when you're just starting out.
Definitely. Definitely. I think that's so important, to exactly what you said. No matter what the situation is, you're putting yourself up there and saying, like, here's the thing that I do. And trying to, like, I don't want people to feel like they're put on the spot to like perform when somebody else says, like, do it now, right? But that you are actively choosing to perform as often as possible, so that you can put yourself in the arena. Like, that's the space. Like, the
Yeah,
practice room is a version. The
it's different.
performance space is your arena. Like, you want to be
There
there.
were a couple of competitions that I did care, like, I wanted to do well and I was nervous about it. So I went and got family friends to come to my pianist's living room so that I could
Yeah.
sing for them, so that I would, okay, I know that I sang it for people, I can do it again. Like, and
Yeah.
that was my way of just kind of finding a way around my nerves,
Yeah.
so that the competition wasn't about the nerves, it was about
Yeah.
doing, my job.
I love that strategy too. That just and just thinking all of the ways that you could put yourself in that scenario, getting like practicing feeling that feeling. You're just like, okay, well, maybe I can have my people come over and I'll do it in front of them, and then I'll also try and do it here, and then I'm going up for this competition, and like, and so you're just thinking through. That's kind of like that like, let's figure it out attitude that I was mentioning way back at the beginning of the podcast is like,
Yeah,
is all
yeah,
part of that. So
yeah,
when
yeah,
you said that competitions also helped you kind of meet your network, right?
yeah.
That's a place where you encountered a lot of people. Is that it? So with gigs, and was that also like conductors, managers, like other colleagues? Like, can you talk a little bit more
So
about that?
this was still kind of towards the beginning, and so at one at NATSA competition,
Hmm.
my first one I did, I met the head of Songfest in California, which
Mm-hmm.
really started me down my song obsession path. So I
Yeah.
met her and she invited me to come there, and I went there for 2 summers, and then um so it was kind of like chance important meetings like that, where, like, if I
Yeah.
hadn't met her at that competition, I wouldn't have then met Libby Larson and Jake Heggie and John Musto, and like all of these people that then became like huge inspirations to me, and kind of started me down the path of not just loving song, but loving how a composer's mind works, and being able, I can't talk to Schubert about how and why he composed this, but I can talk to Jake Heggie about that,
Yeah.
and that fascinates me. And when there's a human, like a real human, I can interact with behind the notes and the expressions that I'm singing, like that. Again, we were talking about curiosity. That started that curiosity and that passion.
Yeah. That's great. Do you briefly, do you have any thoughts on when you hear younger performers worry about being able to go to things like festivals,
Mhm.
maybe financial burdens, those kinds of things? Do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts about encouraging them to figure out ways to go, or also ways that they can um, kind of recreate the benefits of those experiences for themselves. I'm just kind of positing that.
If you can, if you can go. If there's, if you get a scholarship, or if you can go fund me or whatever, do it. They can be invaluable.
Yeah.
They also cannot, there are people who went to the same training programs that I did, who came away with vastly different experiences from that same experience that I did. So, you never know what's going to be important and what's going to be regret, so put yourself out there when you can, understanding that like not everything is going to be exactly what you hoped it would be. So also like, but that goes for like, oh man, if I had only gotten to go to Songfest next summer, like that would have made my career. Maybe not, you just don't know. So like, don't feel like you have completely counted yourself out because you couldn't do that.
Right.
What you can do, and what I highly encourage you to do, is to look around you at your own community, and not just make your own opportunities to perform, but see who is performing. I think that people are overlooking the importance of going to concerts and how much you learn by watching other people perform. Like if you are a freshman in college, you might not be ready to perform with your local art song group, where you've got people who maybe have master's degrees and years of experience. They might not be ready to like welcome you into their rosters. But I guarantee you, if you go to every single concert that they put on in a season, that's a masterclass over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
And you're not just gaining information about, repertoire, you're gaining information about style, you're gaining information about how to look on stage. If like obviously, when we first start out, like I had so many dumb weird physical tics that I had no idea. It just boggles the mind that I thought, these were good things to do on stage. But when you see real professionals do what they do, you're like, oh, I'm not gonna do what I do. I'm gonna do what they do.
You're like,
and
oh,
that's
I like
not
that.
stealing.
I'm gonna keep that.
That's not stealing. That's learning. And that's, that's. And so I would say, like, literally look around you. There's so much good music, and it doesn't have to be art song recitals. It doesn't have to be opera. It can be. I think I learned. I have this indelible memory of a jazz concert at Isaac Hayes Club in Chicago when I was in college. Like this woman just owned the room and just grounded in every way. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, she's such a performer, and I just learned. And so like, if you are a performer who is not actively seeking out and attending the performances of other performers, then you have no business performing, because that means you don't actually respect what everyone else is doing. And if you don't respect everyone else, why would you think they should respect you? Sorry, that's my truth talk for the day.
We got like truth bombs with Laura, but it's real. I mean, but so real. Like, and I could not agree more with what you're saying about soaking it in. And there's so many opportunities for like a master class. You think that by going to this festival, you're going to be watching people and you're going to be performing in front of people, and we don't think about how much of that can happen around us, regardless of really the size of the like locale that you're in. And I say that coming from a lot of different places. So I'm like, no, there's always people around you doing really fascinating things, and like, go check it out, learn from them. And
other disciplines too, like be going to art shows, be going to craft fairs. Have you ever seen someone be so passionate about their art than like a woman who just crocheted like 9,000 doilies and every single one is beautiful, and she did that? Like, I'm just saying,
she's
like,
gonna do my
embroidered
like a body pillow from before.
Yeah, she can be the one who pinpoints our body pillow, and it's gonna be amazing, and you're gonna be inspired. And every night when you go to bed, you're like, that lady, she did that. Her body and her brain.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I love that. Laura, while we're wrapping things up, can you tell all of us where you want to be found on the interwebs? Where can we find you and kind of keep track of your gallivanting and such?
Okay, so I have a website, www.laurastrickling.com. But I tend to hang out most often on Facebook, which I know is passe and makes me old. I've been trying to tick the talks lately, but I'm not so good at it. I am hopeless at Twitter. And sometimes I Instagram, but
There
I
you
love
go.
connecting with everyone everywhere. And I also like, if you're a singer and you friend request me in any of those places, and I can tell that you're a singer, I'll accept. And I'm always open for questions in the DMs, because I think that the more that we share, the better off we all are.
Couldn't agree more. I love it. Laura, thank you so much. I am just so, as always, like I could just talk to you forever about things. And one of the reasons we were talking about this, I was like, I love having conversations with you, and I just want to do it for more people to hear us talking about things. And so we will continue this conversation on and on. But for now, we're going to wrap things up for this masterclass episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.